Welcome back to our continued study of stewardship using the Stewardship Basics Bible study found on the LCMS website. I am Pastor Wright, and today we're going to continue with Lesson 3, and we're just going to do two questions, and that's questions 4 and 5. And we're still wrestling with what took place in Genesis chapter 3 when Adam and Eve partook of the forbidden fruit. As you recall, Eve was tempted by the serpent. And as we learned in the last session, she was given an opportunity to see and interpret God's word differently for her wants, for her desires. And as we know, she partook and gave some to her husband. So now we pick up with this on the forefront of our minds with question number 4. Question 4 simply asks, what do we call it when someone takes something that does not belong to them? How does this apply to Genesis chapter 3? I don't know if you watched me carefully when we talked about what were the implications of Eve partaking of the forbidden fruit, and I threw out the word covetousness, and this is the 9th and 10th commandment. And it seems odd because she was taking, but there was at that point that desire, that sinful desire. And now we take the step forward with that, and this produces theft. The word that we're looking for is theft. That is the action. Because we need to remember that both Eve and Adam are stewards of God's creation, specifically the Garden of Eden. They have been put there to take care of what does not belong to them. All the fruits, all the vegetables, all the animals, all the trees, all the birds, all the fish, all the things that are created. They are stewards, not owners. But we hear that God was very specific. Do not eat of the tree of good and evil in the midst of the garden. And what does Eve do? She takes, she eats that which was not hers, and she gave it to Adam. So we see this rebellious act. She takes matters into her own hands, so to speak, taking a gift that was not offered to her. So she steals from the owner, who is God, and she makes use according to her sinful desires, her sinful wants. So again, the question, what do we call it? Obviously, it is theft. And then the second part to that, how does that apply to Genesis 3? They were put there to work. And what does she do? She takes what is not hers. And of course, Adam is complicit in this because he doesn't stop her, but he also takes and eats what is given to her. The second question, which is question 5, is what is the relationship between theft and idolatry? And idolatry means, and it's the breaking of the first commandment, it's worshiping false gods or putting something before God. And this is really interesting because, again, think about this. Eve is there in the perfection of the Garden of Eden. She has everything literally at her fingertips. And the serpent, more crafty than any other creature, shows Eve that God is holding out on her, that this tree of knowledge of good and evil will not only feed her, provide for her earthly needs, but will also provide for her spiritual needs. She will be like God. If you just but partake in this forbidden fruit, God is holding out on you. He doesn't want you to be like him. And so what does she do? She puts herself in the place of God. She listens to her own desire. She makes it right in her brain that if I take this, I will feed, I will take care of myself, and I will be like God. And so she listens to someone else's word, the serpent's word, and she makes the judgment call. She interprets this command, this law, this act for her own selfish good. She is literally worshiping herself, putting her wants, her desires ahead of God's good gift, God's divine providence, God's promises to take care of her. And so we see an immediate connection between theft and idolatry, because we see that Eve and Adam are taking matters into their own hands. They are putting themselves in the position of God as owner. They are claiming that which is not theirs. And then doing so, doing with creation, doing with the gifts of God as they see fit, not as God sees fit. And so this is really important, and especially when it comes to stewardship, because when we think about stewardship, we think about, what are we doing with my stuff, my ownership, my things? We need to put all this in perspective, that everything put into our hands, our lives, are gifts from God. And how do we use it? Not to false worship, not to fulfill our sinful desires, wills, wants, and whims, but how are we pleasing God with the gifts that He continues to provide? Well, please join us next time as we will wrestle with question number 6 and the continued study of stewardship. God's peace and blessings.